And we are back with Higher Ed Commissioner Shannon Gilkey, and we are coming on the heels of the announcement yesterday that Rhode Island is the first state to mandate all colleges and universities require its students to be vaccinated before the fall semester. First of all, I guess just general reaction on that.
I think it's exciting. It's another tool the vaccination is in our tool belt as a society to beat back the virus and make sure that we're all safe, generally speaking. But for colleges and universities, it's to ensure that their colleges and campuses are safe learning environments, just like the masking and just like the extra cleaning and sanitation efforts, as well as social distancing. And so in-person learning, we know, is what students are craving, getting back to that sense of where we're doing that in-person learning or a hybrid model for delivering education. That's the business of higher education. And so this will let us do that sooner rather than later. And hopefully be more confident that in-person learning is here to stay starting in the fall.
So some questions that we got included, what is the difference between, mandating students get vaccinated versus faculty and staff? We know it's not the same across the board for them. Some folks are wondering, how come I have to, but my professor doesn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. The way I would answer that is that, vaccinating or having vaccinating requirements for students is a very natural thing in higher education. Colleges and universities for decades have required certain vaccinations to enroll into classes. And so there's certainly history here and precedent. And this is just an extension of that as students come on campus to have the COVID vaccine added to that list.
Mm-hmm. And how does, I guess, college campuses, when I say kids, young adults are, staying in the dorms in campuses that have those, does that play a factor at all too?
Absolutely. I mean, we have commuter schools like the Community College of Rhode Island, where there isn't, a large amount of residential. But for our residential colleges and universities, there's that extra layer of, concern that the residential halls are safe. Same thing if we applied that to the vaccination for measles or mumps or any other infectious health concern for students. We want to keep those residential halls safe environments to live, and obviously the classrooms safe environments to learn.
So I know that, as you mentioned, colleges, K to 12, schools have been tracking vaccinations for a very long time, 5+ of them. How will they track? What have your conversations been with COVID vaccinations? Is it just the same as these other ones?
Yeah, so the policies were institutional for vaccination on COVID was led by each institution. So each institution may have a different way to operationalize that tracking. But generally speaking, for the institutions that are under the Council of Post Education, the Community College of Rhode Island or Rhode Island College, those specifically you'll have to have a proof of ID for your vaccination to enter into the classroom. And so that'll be one way to track to make sure that level of safety, public safety, is applied on campus.
And, we're in the real world, it can happen. What can students and families expect if, a student says, hey, I'm not doing it, but I'm going to campus, I refuse?
Sure. Well, they would expect probably to be checked to enter a classroom and to have that proof of campus. Higher education in Rhode Island is we're a destination state for higher education. We have over 78,000 students. So we import lots of folks from around the country that come to our colleges and universities. So making sure that someone coming from another state has that vaccination when they arrive in our state to go to a college or university, that's just another way for us to help keep our public safe as those folks are living here and studying here in the state.
So one topic that caught my eye that we've been seeing in Rhode Island being discussed within the General Assembly, within everyone, is marijuana legalization. When you think of these big topics, you realize just how many different fields this would affect. So should this, legal in Massachusetts, colleges are going about that there. How would legalization impact anything in higher ed? What would folks have to do should that happen?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Colorado, it's been legal for several years as well. And there was probably 3 buckets of ways I would look at that. Obviously speculating here because it's not legal in Rhode Island yet. But if it does, it's certainly the industry, the business and industry, how that changes the landscape in Rhode Island. Colleges and universities are intimately connected because over 99% of jobs being created after 2008 require some type of credential. So there's that to consider. The workforce implications to make sure that we have healthcare workers that are trained to understand the impacts of legalization. Manufacturing. I know that there's been some recent news about the packaging of cannabis products to make them safe. Supply chain technology comes through higher ed, and so so there will be a couple different buckets that we'll have to consider about just the technology and how we are playing a role in that piece of the economy. Obviously, there's the usage of those products on campus and how colleges and universities will handle that from a policy perspective to make sure that, again, just like we talked about with our recent passage of a vaccination policy, how do we keep classrooms where they're learning environments, how do we keep students feeling and believing that they're safe in residential halls? Same kind of mission, but applying that to this again, if it's passed here in the state.
So moving on, I wanted to talk about the CNBC ranking of the top states for business. Rhode Island hitting at number 46, not too hot, but this is a subject that we've been talking about for a while. That job training and how higher ed plays a role in, how will it play a role in boosting us from 46 to a little bit higher.
Absolutely. It's a great thing to consider, particularly when a ranking comes out. There's a lot of attention on how we can do better, right? And particularly, and when I looked at some of the different areas of that ranking, there are some areas where Rhode Island's doing really good work, but particularly related to workforce. I'll say that higher ed and being business friendly, we have a big role to play. Number one, because we're in a knowledge economy, meaning that that employers need certain credentials to make sure that they have the talent that they need. And so we can play a big role in that. And secondly, being business friendly with just our knowledge that's being created at our land grant university, the University of Rhode Island, and our global research university, Brown University. They play a big role with just research and development and taking that ideas coming from our faculty, turning them into businesses and industry and with investing. So there's lots of connection between higher ed and small, medium, and large businesses, and certainly here to talk about those things that we can do to be better and more business friendly to the state.
Okay, and I got in a very interesting email from a viewer after they watched our conversation, I believe on June 30th, about higher ed and job training industry. So I'm going to read that. So this person was wondering, what support do these industries provide for the training? Why should the general taxpayer foot the bill for job training for corporations? That's a, very fair question.
Absolutely, completely fair. And I think this idea of what is a public value versus a private value for as far as business and industry is really the heart of that question. What is the appropriate level of investment that the state or the public should have that's paid for by our taxpayers to make sure that there are good jobs for people to have and opportunities, and then that turns into our really making our communities thrive, versus what is the private good and how business and industry are receiving those profit margins, and how much of that should be balanced. I think we have to take it case by case. Public-private partnerships are nothing that's relatively new. They happen when we try to recruit businesses into the state with tax incentives and other ways. When it comes to job training, which I think is your viewer's question, and it's a really good one, we have to support businesses to make sure that we can have the right people trained to fill those jobs, but also businesses to support their own talent pipeline and invest in their employees as well from a private good.
Mm-hmm. And, I'm just thinking of some examples for some folks to, understand what we're talking about. Do you have any examples of a public-private partnership that, is going both ways?
Yeah, so we have the Westerly Education Center in the south part of the state, and we have an arrangement with Electric Boat that invests significantly in that education center, graduates of our high schools and students that actually pay their employees from their investment to go to Westerly Education Center and get that training. It's also, so there's a private good for them to have that qualified talent pool, but also a public good that we're having good paying jobs that require an education that's funded by the employer right there in one of our education centers.
Yeah, would you say that's the most common? I feel like I see that a lot of employers offering, hey, this is the incentive, we're going to pay for this, whether it be, right up front or some type of reimbursement as long as you stay X amount of years.
Yeah, that's a really good one that I'm familiar with in our arena, in the higher ed arena. Apprenticeships are also very good examples of companies that will fund an apprenticeship based on what they need or certification that they need their employees to be able to do. But it also gives that training plus. So there are apprenticeship models out there that go through our Department of Labor and Training that are a public-private relationship as well.
So I always like to ask, what is the big topic? What are the big points that yourself and maybe other, the governor's office are working on? We're in July, we're in the summer semester, but back to school, back to college will be here in no time.
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest news from our end is that we're very proud of the vaccination policy and the institutions leading on that because it's important. We know from students' responses to what they experienced this past year to get back to in-person training and to have that consistent. So we're out there championing that in-person training or in-person education is happening and is here to stay, hopefully in the fall, particularly as we see this Delta variant, that we're doing everything we can to keep our colleges safe. So
Yeah,
that's the big headline right now. And we want to get our enrollment up. So if you're out there and you're worried about not being able to have in-person education because of the pandemic, know that we're trying to provide the safest campuses in Rhode Island. And I think in the country, since we're the first in the country to do this, to make that happen in this state.
All right, I think that's all we need to get to today. There are plenty more topics that we will hit on in our future conversations. Anyways, thank you so much, Dr. Shannon Gilkey. We'll see you on the next one.
Great. Thank you, Ashley. Bye-bye.